She might be a nice girl.
We can't all be nice girls.
So, how is the tour going so far for the film?
Really well. I mean, it's I tend to take photos of the audiences after the screening, and they all seem to be smiling, so that's good.
So what is the kind of format for the Q&A? Is it someone curating the questions, or is it just open to the audience?
It's a bit of both. So someone warms them up with a few questions, and then we hand it out to the audience.
Have you received any interesting questions from the crowd at all yet?
Yeah, they're always interesting. I mean, people are really engaged with the film, but it's in a way, selfishly, I don't want anything too difficult. but it kind of is usually about the production and kind of the actors and stuff. So it's all good stuff. Really.
Want to kind of stay to the script, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not. It just kind of naturally forms into a series of questions that are always pretty similar. But then that's understandable, I guess. Because in a half hour, there's a few questions you just want to know straight away. In a longer interview, you get into the nitty gritty of it probably, but in a short space of time, like a Q&A, it's usually the same stuff.
Yeah, and you don't really expect people to already know what's been asked before, and I assume it just tends to repeat itself quite a bit.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, on the when I did the high rise tour, some of the people were massive Hiddleston fans, and they would go from they'd go to loads of screenings, and I always felt slightly sorry for them that I felt like a bit like a stand-up who'd been doing his stand-up tour and then went on television and everyone knew that, and then read all the jokes, but yeah, most people, they're coming to it fresh, which is fine.
So I've read into a few of your other films before where it seems like you have quite a sort of long pre-production period, and I was just wondering how the kind of length of this one differed, because obviously with Sightseers you had sort of a lot of locations, but it was there was a lot of improv, and High Rise was very detailed sort of set and art design. So did the sort of the pyrotechnics and technicalities of all that lead to a longer pre-production time than usual?
Yeah, there was it's not, I wouldn't say it's long. I mean, it's a reasonable amount. I mean, usually it's about a month you get before you go in of official pre-production, and then there's soft prep, which is kind of, you just don't get paid for. and you want to, I always want to, it's going to run smooth. The more you prepare, the smoother it's going to run. You don't want to. The whole plan is to get as much of the budget on screen as possible, and not to waste any money. And the more you prep the film, the less money gets wasted by things not working or you not having thought things through properly. I mean, there's a million and one details to think about. It's from I was amazed on Free Fire. To be honest, there was some amazing stuff which isn't particularly interesting. But it was like, because the warehouse is full of rubbish and stuff and paperwork and magazines and things, that all had to be made by the art department. So I was kind of finding things like invoices and stuff from the period just in piles of rubbish which someone has had to have made, and I think that side of things is really amazing.
Oh, so you were finding things that you hadn't even seen yourself in the planning stage, just on set?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have passed my eye over it and I knew they were doing it, but you don't see every single, in a space that's as big as that, you wouldn't necessarily see everything. And Packy Smith, who's the designer of it, I'd worked with him on High Rise, and I loved the work that he did on that, and that's what kind of made me want to work with him on Free Fire, to give it that level of detail. I mean, Packy's a painter, and so he treats the sets like a canvas, really. So you can zoom in on any bit of it, and it's all super detailed. I remember on High Rise there was, in the kitchens and stuff, there was stuff in all the drawers, so the actors could roam around and do things, and they would never go out of character. And I think that's really interesting, and that certainly was the case on Free Fire as well. That there's just detail everywhere, so the actors can really burrow into it.
On the kind of same note as the art design, the most notable part in this film is most likely the costume design. And I was just wondering if you went in with any particular idea, or if the people involved with that just kind of sort of had a free range to do what they want and come back to you.
Well, Amy Jump was across that as well, working with Emma Fryer, who was the costume designer. The references for the clothes were from like street photography of the period rather than from fashion or from films. So we were looking at what people were actually wearing rather than, you know, trying to mimic a movie or something like that, which I think is always slightly reductive, you know. So we kind of, and when you see like street photography, you kind of go, wow, you know, it was actually the clothes are kind of crazier than you even remember, you know. But then some things are really classic and, you know, people are still wearing them now, like Cillian Murphy's leather jacket and, you know, trousers, but then the shirt and the t-shirt with, you know, the under vest and stuff was more period. I mean, I really like, was it Sergeant Rock, the DC war comic, and in that they have an issue, which is that obviously it's a thing about a platoon of soldiers, but the clothes are always, you know, soldiers' clothes all the same, so how do they differentiate them? And they have very specific things that make you know shorthands for all the characters, and we would kind of thought about that for this, that would, you know, because it's a lot of people and it's a lot of cutting between them quickly, you need to recognise who they are, so they all have very characterful outfits. And then the other thing I thought about, which I've been kind of developing since High Rise, is that the clothes you wear in your own time zone aren't necessarily the clothes from that period, and that you basically stop caring about fashion in your 20s, and you tend to wear those clothes for the rest of your life, and that's why you used to get old grannies looking like they were from, you know, the 1940s, because they made those decisions about their clothes very early on in their lives, and they were quite trendy clothes when they wore them at the start, but by the end they looked really anachronistic. And the same, I know the same for me, you know, I'm wearing the same clothes I wore when I was 20. So the people in the film have their clothes set at different time periods, basically.
And I kind of like as well that it's sort of, you can use that to show not only just how set in their ways people are, but how obviously the rich people would be naturally more fashionable and the poorer people would stick to older clothes.
Yeah, or they'd have a different attitude to their clothes, you know. I mean, I think that obviously Sharlto Copley's character he likes clothes, so he has tailored stuff that's more in fashion, on point, but say Michael Smiley's character is more, his clothes are more 1950s, because that's when he would have been a kid, you know.
And at what point did was the location chosen in the pre-production?
Reasonably early on, because, you know, it's very difficult to do anything unless you've got that set, that space. So I think it was. I think we'd got the location before the pre-production started. Definitely.
How did the location kind of affect the shooting of it, and vice versa? Like, did anything change from the script because of the location?
Not really. I mean, the location gave us extra spaces, which was good, so we could build bits and bobs and have it had like variable spaces, so we didn't have to go to other locations to get those bits, which was great. But the script had some specific things in it about what the shape of the space should be, and it fitted all that criteria, even down to having a flight of stairs that we needed and an office overlooking the main warehouse, which it had, you know, and other spaces we were looking at that were bigger. We were thinking that we would have to build those things, but it turned out that the place we found was perfect.
So there was no kind of structural changes to anything at all during the shoot. It was all just small details like the dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of things that changed in terms of, I realised when I walked through the script in the early pre-production stages that maybe, say, Army Hammer's character, Ord, gets stuck behind a load of boxes for quite a long period of the movie, and it hadn't become apparent to me until I walked the course of, you know, and I went, oh, that's a shame that he gets stuck there, so I kind of rewrote that slightly so that he becomes more involved and more active. So there was a couple of little changes there, and then things like, I remember seeing the kind of wooden wheel, the cable barrel thing when I was walking around the set, and I talked to the special effects guys and said, oh, can you rig this so that it can, you know, have bullet hits on it, and maybe then someone can roll with that, using it as a shield, and yeah, and little things like that. I mean, the other one was, I think that we were looking at the canister explosion thing, and that was originally written as very small, like just as an aerosol can.
Right.
And and things like this always look all right on the page, and you of actually having to shoot it, you kind of go, well, it's not enough, or it's going to look stupid, so you kind of then rejig it. And that was all very early on. It was before the actors turned up. I kind of went, you know what, this needs something much bigger. And then from that, it ended up building the space that those canisters lived in, and then that all had to. There was loads of knock on from that, because then that had to collapse, but then it had to collapse in a way that wouldn't block the path that Sharlto Copley takes later on. So there's all sorts of complicated stuff like that goes on.
As well in other interviews, you kind of said about how bits of it are inspired by just reading the transcripts of shootouts.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how you kind of found trying to take this inspiration, but trying to make it original in your own way without relying on stuff that's come before.
Well, the thing is about stuff from before is they're usually pretty simple shootouts, and they're usually shots of, it's a shot of someone firing, and then it's a shot of someone ducking. There's not much more to it than that. Or unless you're talking about the kind of the balletic kind of John Woo movies and all that kind of jumping around stuff. But it was always meant to be like a kind of procedural kind of, I wouldn't say realistic, but it more real than a Hollywood shootout would be, trying to be, And I took all that from those transcripts and from experience of shooting actual guns. I thought, well, that, there's not necessarily nods to other films in that respect. But then I think this is a kind of a critical issue with filmmaking, isn't it? That films are always compared to other movies rather than the space that they live in, which might be more about reality, taking inspiration from reality rather than other films. It's a thing that happens. It's the go-to kind of conversation, isn't it? It's like, it's a film in a warehouse, therefore it's like the same as other films in a warehouse, therefore they're all connected, but are they? not necessarily,
So I wanted to quickly ask about the editing as well, which is that this is sort of your most linear film for a while. I was wondering if that was just driven entirely by the nature of the film, or if it was more of a personal choice that you wanted to make something a bit more linear.
Well, I think I wanted to make a movie that was, like I say, was procedural, but looking back to that kind of storytelling, which is much more nuts and bolts, kind of characters' point of views. A lot of things are created through eye lines, and there's lots of cutaways of things that people pick up and look at, and a lot of the action is, the objects cause action, and cause and effect. So that was different, and it's the first film we've ever done without a montage in it, I think. And I'm a big fan of montages, always love them, but this one didn't merit it, and I kind of felt I'd probably got to the end of my montaging in High Rise, so it was kind of that was different. But yeah, they're all different, the movies, and I find that it's always the thing. The way I approach it is it's just I'm the witness of the film and the story, and I try and witness it the best way I can, And I think that doesn't necessarily. And once you're in the once you're making a movie, you don't really think about other people's films particularly. So it's the mood of the actors and the mood of the space which kind of dictates how they turn out. Yeah.
As well as you've talked about how obviously the film is a period piece, but in other interviews you've talked about how it was more set in the 70s due to necessity, like the characters not having mobile phones or things like that. And I was just wondering if it was a choice to kind of shoot it in a modern fashion just to kind of separate it from that past a bit more, or if it was just because of shots that you wanted to include in the film.
Well, I think shooting in a 70s style, or any style, is kind of dangerous, It's like, I don't think I do that. I try not to. Sometimes you look back at your own stuff and go, oh God, yeah, that's similar to X, Y, and Z, But it's not like a sitting down with a thing going, this is going to be like this movie, we're going to do this, do this style or something. I think it has to be, because then it's, I don't know, you've got to be true to the materials and the tools that you have. And the digital cameras work in a very different way from film cameras, and just in terms of how much you can shoot, or how much coverage you can have, and that there's not really a cost knock-on from shooting hours and hours and hours in the same way that a 70s film would, unless it was massive budget, they'd shoot in a very different way because they just couldn't
a final wrap-up question so you can go. You started out as a video editor and eventually moved into directing, and I was wondering if you had any advice for people that are sort of stuck behind the computer and want to make their way behind the camera instead.
Yeah, well, we just do it. I mean, that's the thing. That's what we did. Me and Amy and Andy Stark, the producer, and Laurie Rose, the OP, and Bobby Entwistle, the sound recordist, and Rob Hill on Down Terrace as well. So we just kind of decided we were going to do it, and we went out and shot something. And I think it can be as simple as that. It's not. The only thing that's holding you back is your will to do that and to risk your own money and time. And I would forget anything about funding or getting studios or financiers to pay for stuff. You just have to do it yourself, because why would they risk money on you if you'd never done anything before? Even if you've done shorts, it's kind of that was the epiphany that I had about it, and it took me a long time to learn it. I'd been that person kind of going, why won't they fund my movie, and taking meetings and waving scripts at people and saying it was all unfair, and that's just the way it is, you just have to go out and do it. And once you've done it, it's totally freeing, because also if you do it yourself, you don't have to take anybody's notes. You do exactly, please yourself, and you find out if you were right or not. And if it's crap, it's your fault, and only yours, and that's fine. And I certainly made a lot of long-form movies before I made Down Terrace, which were bad and I didn't really show them to anybody. And that's just, I think, that the being a director is such an odd job, and such a that there's no kind of standard route through to it. But certainly the easiest way, as far as I could see, is to go and make something. Yeah, and I guess the other thing is that that you don't need permission, you don't need to ask, and you don't need someone to think you're good or tell you you're bad. It doesn't make any difference. Those people are irrelevant. The only person that's important is you and your idea of what you want to do. And then the second part of it is, don't do something complicated, do something simple, because there's no point. You don't get extra points for making a feature film set in space for no money. It just looks a bit crap. You probably want to do something that focuses on the things that don't cost anything, like really good acting or a really good script.
Oh, great! Thank you very much for all your time. And I really enjoyed the film, so thank you very much for that as well. I'm looking forward to seeing it again when it comes to Cambridge. But thank you very much for your time. Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye-bye.